what are the wider ramifications of all these developments that are taking place? A terror conclave in Beirut, that's not the only challenge for Israel. Turkey's President Erdogan, he refuses to call Hamas a terrorist organization. He calls them Mujahideen instead. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says Hamas actions were not in a vacuum, but a result of 56 years of suffocating occupation and suffering of Palestinian people. What next for Israel? Eylon Levy is the spokesperson in Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office, and he joins me on this special broadcast. Mr. Levy, you heard Turkey's president. He's apparently called off his proposed visit to Israel, accusing Israel of crimes against humanity. He insists Hamas are not terrorists but Mujahideen fighting for their land and for freedom. How does Israel view this statement and these developments, sir?
We utterly deplore any attempt to present Hamas as anything other than terrorists, as anything other than terrorists who are worse than ISIS. I wonder perhaps whether the president has forgotten what Hamas did on the morning of October 7th. It sent death squads into Israeli villages. They shot everyone they saw, civilians. They burned whole families alive in their homes. They beheaded people. They beheaded babies. They raped girls so brutally they broke their bones. They tortured and mutilated parents in front of their children, children in front of their parents. In one house, the first responders saw that the terrorists had gouged a man's eyes out, cut off his wife's breasts, chopped off his son's fingers, and cut off his girl's foot. There is no way to describe the atrocities that Hamas conducted on the morning of October 7th as anything other than a gruesome and barbaric act of savagery and terror. And Israel is building a coalition of international partners that understand that Israel has not only a right but a duty to defend itself against this atrocious terror attack. This
Fair
was
enough.
a crime
As you
against
build this
humanity.
coalition,
What
about the United Nations, Mr. Levy? The United Nations, because it's not just Erdogan. UN Secretary General, he sought a pause in Israel's offensive. Antonio Guterres instead talks of 56 years of suffocating occupation and suffering of Palestinian people. Israel is being asked to pause the bombing.
The UN Secretary General also said there is no excuse and there can be no excuse for the atrocities that Hamas conducted against Israeli civilians on the morning of October 7th. He has been clear on that fact. Now, as for his statement that the massacre did not happen in a vacuum, he is correct. It comes in the context of many years in which Hamas has said that it openly plans to murder all the Jews and destroy the state of Israel. It comes in the context of years in which Hamas has exploited all the humanitarian aid going into the Gaza Strip, all the aid that foreign governments have been giving the people of Gaza in order to build its machine of death against Israel. Just think of all the cement that Israel sent into Gaza to build houses. Hamas used it to build tunnels. All the fuel that Israel sent into the Gaza Strip in order to fuel hospital generators, Hamas is now using to shoot rockets. So the Secretary General is correct. Hamas's massacre did not come in a vacuum. It came in the context of this genocidal terror organization's clear campaign to build a machine of terror and war against Israel in order to perpetrate crimes against humanity, the atrocities that it conducted on the 7th of October, when it murdered 1,400 of our friends and family, injured over 5,000, traumatized tens of thousands, and took 220 of our people hostage into the Gaza Strip, including 30 children, including babies. This was an act of terror, and we expect the whole world to stand by our side as we fight to defeat the terror organization that did this.
Are you disappointed that's not happening, given what the UN Secretary General said, given what Turkey's president has said? And I'm not even talking about what Iran says or what some of the other hostile powers may say. Your effort to have a wider coalition against Hamas is running into a roadblock with people saying, at least pause the bombing, let humanitarian aid reach the Gaza Strip. Even your ally Britain is calling for a pause in bombing. Rishi Sunak has called for a pause for humanitarian aid to reach the Gaza Strip, sir.
Israel is firmly and profoundly disappointed by any nation that is not standing by our side. And as Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said, the UK wants Israel to win. The United States has said Israel will have everything it needs to win. The president of France urged Israel to fight terrorism without mercy. So we know that we have the support of the nations of the free world in this campaign. But Let me address that question about a ceasefire, because I know that many of the people who are asking for a ceasefire are asking so out of the best of intentions. Israel will not go back to 6 a.m. on October 7th. We will not go back to a world in which a terrorist organization can invade our homes, behead, burn our families alive. We will not go back to that world. On the 7th of October, Israel was the victim, the Israelis were the victims of an unprovoked act of aggression. We were the victims of crimes against humanity that, by the way, have either killed, abducted, or injured the nationals of over 40 states. So Israel is going after the terrorists who did this. We're making every possible precaution in order to minimize harm to civilians. It's why we're asking them to step out of the way. It's why we're working with international partners so that humanitarian aid can enter the Gaza Strip through Egypt, through the Rafah border crossing. But Israel is not going to let the terrorists who committed the October 7th massacre, who beheaded our people, who burned whole families alive, who raped our little girls. Israel will not allow the terror organization that did that to get away with it. And we know that the free world stands with us and wants us to win this war because we're fighting not only for our people, we're fighting for the world.
And Mr. Levy, there are reports that Qatar, is indicating that there could be some positive news on hostages. So is Israel willing to let supplies into Gaza Strip in return for either all hostages or at least the civilian hostages?
Humanitarian aid is already entering the Gaza Strip. It's entering through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. Israel has no objection to that. We want humanitarian aid to reach the civilians in Gaza on condition that it not be taken by Hamas, on condition that Hamas not exploit these humanitarian corridors to smuggle weapons. That is something Israel will not allow, but humanitarian aid is entering the Gaza Strip, and we're very pleased with that.
Okay, but it's required in larger quantities, but in exchange for hostages, is that being worked out for it to go from Israel into the Gaza Strip if all hostages, or at least the civilian hostages, are returned?
Israel is not even going to consider business as usual or trade through its crossings until all 220 of our hostages are home. You know, for many years, Israel provided fuel, it provided water and electricity to the Gaza Strip for free because Hamas didn't pay its electricity bills. And on the morning of October 7th, Hamas fired rockets at the electricity lines, providing electricity to the people of Gaza. It dug up water pipes paid for with international aid in order to send rockets at Israel. It attacked the crossings through which tens of thousands of workers from Gaza went every day into Israel in order to earn their daily bread. So the prospect of Israel opening the borders that Hamas attacked in order to provide humanitarian aid while it holds 220 of our people, including 30 of our children hostage, that is not a viable option. Humanitarian aid is entering. It's entering through Egypt. That's the correct approach, and we hope that that is going to continue, and we hope that the entry of trucks into the Gaza Strip will continue as long as Hamas does not exploit humanitarian aid to arm its own war machine and its machine of terror and death against the civilians of Israel.
The IDF has been quoted saying they're ready for ground operations and they're waiting for the political signal. Is there a delay in giving that political signal? Is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not sure that the Hamas war-fighting capabilities have been neutralized in these past 19 days and that there could be a major threat to your mechanized forces from anti-tank missiles or IEDs or anti-tank mines when forces go in?
I'm afraid this is the last question I can answer because I have to run to another interview. Israel is going to proceed with the next stage in the operation to dismantle Hamas in response to the October 7th massacre in accordance with our operational needs. Israel isn't acting out of anger or revenge. We have a strategic necessity to destroy the terror organization that committed the October 7th massacre, the worst terror attack in world history after 9/11, and we will use the full might of the IDF, and we will use our force wisely and carefully and judiciously at a time and place of our choosing.
Before I let you go, just answer one question on what is known as the Gaza Metro, the maze of tunnels in Gaza.
I'm afraid we need to wrap up.
After this question,
I'm afraid
is the Gaza Metro your Israel's Achilles heel, sir?
I'm afraid we have to go to another interview. I'm sorry.
Okay, but does that Gaza Metro or those maze of tunnels, does that remain one of the biggest challenges as far as Israel is concerned?